Yo, another week, another hip hop podcast. Welcome back.
Hey guys.
How you doing, Bria?
I'm all right. I'm really antsy. I drank like a shit ton of coffee because I was really tired today. So,
Do people? I don't know how. Okay, obviously people enjoy the taste of coffee. I might be the only adult human that hates it.
no, I don't like it. I genuinely never drank coffee in my entire life until I became a cook and had to work crazy hours. And then I kind of had no choice but to drink coffee because it genuinely kept me awake.
So it does actually work.
Yeah. So, I mean, it works especially if you're not a caffeine person or caffeine addict, and I'm not. I don't drink soda. I never drank coffee until then. I mean, I wasn't, so it really affected me. I would drink that shit and be awake.
So you get turned up. So you turned up right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
I mean, I drank it earlier today, so I'm kind of coming down off of it. So it's I feel tired, but my body's still no, it's fine. You're up. You can do anything. So it's interesting. I only drink it when I'm super tired because it does wake me up, but it kind of keeps me awake, and then I can't sleep at night.
Yeah, that sounds like it sucks. I only drink tea.
Me too. Well, I used to only drink tea, and I'm very much a tea guy, but tea doesn't keep me awake all the time.
Yeah.
But
So,
how are you?
I'm all right. I'm beat up. My body's definitely beat up. I'm on a cut. So I'm going from 170-ish down to 155-ish.
Oh, Lord.
And so it's a process. It's a process, but we gonna make it through. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little more irritable than usual. I'm a little more tired than usual. It's all right. If you guys hear voices in the background, that's okay. There's some new unreleased exclusive music that you might hear on this podcast unintentionally today. It's okay, though. Tell us what you think of it.
Good times. Shout out to the Tri Factory. Shout out to Tay.
It's a working studio.
Yeah, I mean, there's niggas recording in basically every room and niggas tattooing next door. So it's always fun stuff.
So if y'all ever want to record, or you wonder all right, these fools have their own podcast. How can I have my own? I'm well, it's easy as signing up on the website.
Oh yeah.
In fact, Bria will even manage that for you.
Yeah, just hit me up. Honestly, I will answer those DMs if you are asking or inquiring about the Tri Factory. I'm actually about to start doing some tours soon. I'm about to start setting that up next week. So by the time you guys are listening to this, I will have started my tour. So if you want to just get a free tour, I'm happy to do that too. Yeah.
So today I wanted to talk about, there's a larger theme of what I want to talk about today, right? Today I want to talk about how hip hop and religion interact in the present state. There's been a lot of hip hop and religion in the past. For example, just off the top of my head, one of Tupac's most famous songs is, Hail Mary. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of the West Coast artists, the Jacka shouts. I know Dave will get this reference. I don't know how many other people will. Shouts to Quran Husseina and the Jacka for a really, really infamous string of religious things. You obviously have just going back in hip hop, so many references to religion. But I want to talk about it localized in today. And the reason I want to talk about it is because, we're in DC, we're in PG right now, but we are DMV based. And for those that know, Mr. Kanye Omari West decided to show up at Howard homecoming yesterday.
Turn up with his whole white family.
And decided to have Sunday service on a Saturday morning.
Turn up.
And still called it Sunday service, mind you.
I mean, of course.
And I'm constantly perplexed by Kanye these days. And not in a good way, just in a perplexed way. I'm just confused, right? Because I can't hate the guy because of what he has done for me and what he has given to me in the form of those first 3 albums. But I don't have to like him anymore. And I just don't understand his movement.
Yeah.
So he shows up to Howard. I know 2 people that went to that thing, and I'm a little why did y'all bother to go to this shit?
Man, same.
Why did y'all bother to go to this shit?
I had a couple niggas I was on the yard. I was on yard. Oh, true. Let me unfollow your dumbass.
I went to Howard homecoming. I didn't go for that.
Turn up.
I went to Howard homecoming yesterday. There was one of my friends. I'm oh yeah, this is the same regular homecoming crowd. But one of the interesting things about more interesting things about Kanye yesterday was that there was actually a very, very small crowd for him.
Yeah.
Compared to what Howard homecoming usually is, even for 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
but that might have been.
And for Kanye West, it's still Kanye West.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So no matter like what kind of state he's in socially, I think he has enough fandom and fan base where people would expect people from Delaware and shit to drive to Howard to see Kanye.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but what I wanted to focus in on is Kanye's use of sort of the Sunday sermon as his his concert shtick. Like that's how he performs now. That's his new performance art. Is essentially
It's
exporting.
his new merch is like churchy clothes.
His new merch is nasty. Like I understand. There's like, all right, all things are capitalism and yada yada yada. You sell what you want to sell, and if no one buys it, then they'll change it, whatever. But this new merch of like, I'm just gonna blatantly just put God on a T-shirt and sell it to you for $100. That's nasty. They're
$200 pairs of socks and shit. Like,
and maybe it's all going to a good cause.
It's not. Though.
I don't know. Like I don't know.
I think it's safe to assume that it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because if it did, we would already know that. Like
They'd market that too.
Yeah.
Probably. But I wanted to focus in on the idea of Kanye sort of exporting Sunday service, like regular black Sunday church service, and using that essentially now as his performance art. Like he didn't do anything incredibly innovative, right? He just took something that already existed and said, "Hey, world, take a look.
Kanye's version of it.
This is what I'm doing now," right?
Yeah.
And like, I have a lot of friends, a lot of Christian friends, obviously, that are very, very like conflicted about this, right? Some people are like excited that he's doing this and are like happy because like the more, in their opinion, the more God is brought into the mainstream, the better.
Right.
And there's some people who are like the unsanctimonious nature of how he's doing this, like sort of just like, yeah, we're just gonna take random popular songs and put God words in them, and it's gonna be great, and just haphazardly throwing them out there, even if they sound good, is bothering them. And I, as a Muslim dude, I don't know where I come down on it because it is just definitely just very weird to look at. If someone did this similarly, like with like Quranic verses or something like that, like I know Muslims would be up in arms.
Yes.
They'd be very, very unhappy.
For sure.
So when I'm looking at it like from my perspective, I'm like, wow, what Kanye's doing is really not necessarily endorsed by my side. What do you feel like?
I mean, I was definitely raised with like a Christian background, a Christian faith. So amongst my spirituality, I guess that's the religion I would say I'm the most connected to. I think it's completely blasphemous.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, but I didn't want to just be like,
I think it's completely blasphemous, especially because, and I understand people's argument, like, oh, like, he's such a popular public figure, he's gonna like turn more people to religion and everything. And it's like, why do you think he would do that? Like, other than singing gospel songs, which he's not even singing the real lyrics of the gospel songs, he's remixing R&B songs, sometimes that are like literally about sex, and combining them with other gospel songs. So how is that introducing people to gospel music? It's not.
Yeah.
And he's not preaching the word of God in any way, shape, or form. He literally just comes, sings music, goes on rants about other shit. He told us that next time they throw the slavery net, let's all not stand in the same place or whatever.
Which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
He's an idiot, bro. But it's like, that is nowhere near close to preaching the word of God. Like, that's not even, and I don't even think he's attempting to preach the word of God. He's been going on these rants way before he picked up this religion shtick. So I don't think that's what he's even attempting to do, is preach. I just think when he feels like it, he goes on one of his rants. Like, I think he's trying to, it's funny. I think Kanye is finally in a place, and I think he's been there for a while, but I think he's finally at a place to where he's so out of touch with himself. He doesn't realize that some of the actions that he makes just like really reflects what period he's in. And I think this exploitation of blackness, which is what this is, you're not trying to put anybody onto religion, but you know that this type of background, this type of culture, this type of music is really, really important to black people. Knowing goddamn well black people don't fuck with you right now because of the things and the things and the people that you have chosen to endorse for whatever fucking reason. Like, niggas aren't fucking with you right now. And I mean, a lot of people have pointed that out, and I appreciate people's consciousness. Even before this whole Sunday service thing, how people were like, niggas just throw a church choir in the background of anything and niggas fuck with it. You know what I'm saying? Which is like facts, because that 2 Chainz song, the 2.0 shit, that's still my shit. That shit fucking goes. Like,
Oh yeah, the sound itself is so powerful,
Is a
right?
hit.
Like,
You know
it's
what I'm
amazing.
saying?
Like,
but I think
it's a cheat code,
right? So I think we understand that. Like, it's just another way to kind of exploit blackness. Just like all hip hop, thuggish, ruggish. We all mad at everybody wearing cornrows and chains and whatever the fuck. All these niggas over here in Asia, over here doing shit to turn they fucking hair, fucking afro and curly and shit like that. I feel like it's kind of the same way. I mean, there is a lot of culture, and that is something that black people already like kind of assumed to not have. There is a lot of culture in the church. It's kind of like one of the few cultures that black people, African Americans, actually have. So, and he's completely exploiting that.
So, I agree with everything you said, but I'm gonna take not the other side, but another look at it, right? So, yes, Kanye is definitely saying, here's an export of African American culture, and here, let me give it to the world, right?
To white people.
To white people specifically. That's what he's been doing his entire career, though, right? And that's what a lot of rappers do for most of their careers.
For sure.
Like, here's like this specific part of black culture. I'm going to put it on display. Most of my fans are going to be white. Most of the people that buy my tickets are going to be white. This is different because it involves God, right? This is special because it involves a special connection that black people have like worked at and sort of cultivated with God themselves and have created for themselves. And I think that's the biggest issue here, right? Is like, okay, whatever, you're doing the same culture vulture doing thing that a lot of other people are doing. Normally that would be okay because that's just the business model that you need to succeed in the way like capitalism works. But when you're doing it with God, it's very different than when you're doing it with anything else.
Right.
Because this is like you're messing with the meaning of life.
Right.
But the other side of it is that Kanye said this is what he was always going to do. Right? This is what he's always wanted to do. He's always wanted to make quote unquote gospel music and be a gospel artist, like going back all the way in those other interviews. But I think one of the most interesting things you said is he's a reflection of the period that he's in.
Or just a reflection of the space that he's in right now. And like the people that he is surrounded by every day.
No, but I also, yes. But also, like, I wanted to take that statement and, like, I think I agree with it on, like, a lot of levels. So, like, you know how, like, artists have periods? Like, Rembrandt had, like, his blue period, etc.
I know what you mean, yeah.
Yeah. I think Kanye is a reflection of his, like, current period. His current period is, like, he's in the period of artistry where he is exploitative by nature.
Yep.
Because of how successful he is.
Yep.
And this gets to the whole like billionaire argument. Like once you become like, and Kanye's not a billionaire, but like bear with me here. Like once you attain a certain level of success, you do more harm than good by staying at that level of like wealth, staying at that level of like saturation. Right? It's the idea that there's no good billionaires in this world. It can also be extended to say there's no good way to be as successful as Kanye is for as long as he has been. Like, there's no good way to stay good when you are that successful. And, like, there are very few examples of people who have stayed this famous for this long and have remained sane.
For sure.
And have remained without sort of creating a toxic situation for themselves. I mean, I can't really name anyone, to be honest, with this intensity of like fame. Like
definitely not an artist at all. Like I think of like Oprah, or Bill Gates.
But Bill Gates is a piece of shit too.
He seems like a piece of shit.
But he's done a lot of pieces of shit stuff,
right? But it also seems like he's really in touch. Like I feel like he genuinely like makes a decision to be a piece of shit, and it's just like I'm not. You know what I'm saying? Like,
you think Kanye is not self-aware of his piece of shitness?
I think his head has become so big and I think he has inflated himself to the point to where I think it's hard for him to get in touch with reality, especially when it comes to himself. And I think he thinks like me telling me I am this thing is how I get to being this thing, which I feel because I mean, shit, he got this fucking far. But I think when you do that, I think you don't look at yourself for like who you genuinely are. Like you don't recognize your faults because real niggas, lit niggas don't fail. So I feel like
that's not true, guys. But yeah,
it's definitely facts not true. But I feel like he's the type of nigga to tell himself that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like even when he takes the L, it's like that's not an L. I just wasn't supposed to do that. Like I just feel like he just keeps going. Like you know what I mean? I don't know.
No, I understand what you mean. Like he definitely just he continues onward without the sort of reflection piece, or maybe he just doesn't. Maybe we don't obviously see that, but whatever reflecting he's doing is clearly not connecting with his fan base or his original fan base.
Yeah.
You know, going back to the point of like religion, it's interesting, right? Because like Kanye made Jesus Walks, he's never going to hell, whatever. So it's fine, right? In the sense, he brought a lot of what is today the modern relationship with rap and God, right? There's always been like God in rap, and I've talked about earlier about, you know, Hail Mary and all the other stuff. Even like Queen Latifah and sort of bringing in some of the more quote unquote Hotep vibes with her like Egyptian gods and things like that, and goddesses and things of that nature. This is not to discount all of that. What I'm talking about, or what we're talking about in this episode today, is more so the modern relationship between hip hop and God, which is very much defined by Kanye. It was very much defined by Jesus Walks in a lot of ways, right? That's what gave Chance sort of the permission to run and fly, and why Chance looked up to Kanye so much coming up. That's what, like when Lupe Fiasco remixed Jesus Walks to Muhammad Talks, like there's a lot of examples of like that one particular song and that one particular moment sort of like vibing and into a bunch of other places. So Kanye has sort of been, and you know, again, we're not discounting Lecrae, but even if you look at like Elzai, or not Elzai, excuse me, what's his name? The guy on his label. The one who writes for him sometimes. Sci-Hi the Prince.
I was like, Sci-Hi, Consequence, Rhyme Fest, who we talking about?
Sci-Hi, there we go. Sci-Hi actually released a Christian rap album. His last release was a really good Christian rap album too. All that comes from like the tree of Kanye. And so on the one hand, you have what that started from, which was, I think, a very honest attempt to show his love of Jesus and Jesus Christ. And you have now what's sort of been like this cannibalistic attempt of like, let me sell you church clothes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think throughout hip hop, because of that, the original moment, right? The original moment coming from Jesus Walks, you have a lot of other more thoughtful relationships with God sort of forming, particularly from Chicago artists. And I think of like No Name, and I think of Saba, and I think of the super group that we now have, guys. It's called Sage or something.
Yeah. Sage or something.
Do you remember what it's called?
No.
They just posted something on Twitter.
Yeah,
like
something
last
Sage.
week.
Yeah.
Something Sage. I'm so happy though. Like,
yeah, it's cute.
We called for it and it came. But I think of Saba and No Name in particular, and in the way they talk about God and the way they talk to God in their music. Especially on Telephone, No Name made a lot of references to God. On Care for You, or Care for Me. Saba straight up says, "Yo, God, what the fuck is going on?" Like that was a lot of his discourse with him. And it's interesting to see how like the paths have diverged and how God finds his way into every single crevice of hip hop. Because then you think about the South's relationship with God, and it's completely different. You think about the way Big Crit talks about religion and the way he talks about God, and sort of like that deep Southern tradition.
Yep, culture. It just breeds culture.
Yeah, that's down there. And so almost all Southern rappers talk about God to a certain extent.
Of course.
And they talk about God very differently than people from the Midwest, or people from the East Coast, or people from the West Coast. It's a very localized thing in the way they speak on it, and the way they speak about it. And
actually, I think amongst the conversation of religion, one thing I wanted to be able to point out was kind of like the verses, or the opposite side of that, which is like, I think with the kind of rise of the importance of religion being mentioned in hip hop, it also like what's it, the
atheist?
Not atheist, but like the
agnostic?
I guess like the agnostic views, or like the throwing away religion or whatever. And I think about people like Tyler the Creator or whatever, and like, especially in his early career, like that was his thing, the whole upside down crosses. And that's what I was going to say. I think another reason why what Kanye's doing is so blasphemous is because it's very, very blatant. I mean, yeah, he's discussed Jesus Walks before. Obviously that at the time that he did it, and I think the way he went about it was a different time. It was a different performance, and he was in a much different space. And then this just seems so blatant. Like you said, he just puts God on a t-shirt or whatever. And I think with Tyler, it was way more nuanced. He didn't really mention religion too much, other than like sometimes like God hates me like everyone else does kind of stuff, you know. But I think just more, and like the more his aesthetic, like the blacked out contacts
The
that he used to wear, the
666,
666
all
and
that
upside down
shit.
crosses, and I remember black people specifically immediately turning away from that because of that. Like, oop, that's not of the Lord. I'm not fucking with that.
And then there was a certain group of black people that were immediately attracted to it
Yep.
because of it, right?
Yep. Yeah, and that was like the misfits, the outsiders, because that was my brother. You know, the weird skater people who like.
Shout out Enrique Libre.
I feel like we say that like once a week now.
Such a great name.
But yeah, like somebody who was kind of like forcefully raised in such a religious kind of space or spirituality like background or whatever, which is like many black people. I mean, religion is something that is definitely forced upon us, which is something that I wanted to mention with like Southern rap. It's either a lot of Southern rap is rappers either embracing it or then basically saying like my mama or my grandmama or whoever tried to make me talk to God and now I'm about to move these bricks instead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so the acknowledgement of God, but also like God has never done anything for me. I think that's really, really important.
So exactly. There's two sides to this. So, whoo, just blew the conversation wide open, which is great. So I wanted to talk about the space for the black atheist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or even the brown atheist, whoever, like the people that listen to hip hop. There's always been a space for, but particularly black atheists.
Mm-hmm.
There's always been a particular space for that person in hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
and the outright rejection of God in the way Tyler did it, right? Which is very much not like fuck God, it's more so like here's an upside down cross, here's something more subtle, or even in the way JIDK did it on his most recent album, where he interviewed Tyler and it was like, hey, what did you think about God, and how he's questioning is he real, which is the whole point of the album, right? That space is very, very special, I think,
Yeah.
for a lot of folk, and this sort of like, again, back to Kanye, this blasphemous pushing of religion into like the mainstream is also making them uncomfortable.
Right.
And I know, like in particular, one of the reasons a lot of people dislike Chance's most recent album, and I'm thinking one person in particular who I'm very good friends with on Twitter, shout out to Yodit. She's like, look, Coloring Book turned me off because in acid rap, Chance was just like me. He was questioning the existence of his faith. In Coloring Book, he was all the way in on his faith, which is fine. I'm happy for him because he at least worked. But on this most recent album, Big Day, he's almost a youth minister level. And and a lot of those people that found solace in Chance's music, especially when it came to acid rap, no longer can find that solace there.
Right.
So they lose something when the artist does that. And this is not to decry an artist for finding their faith. That's great for Chance, right?
Right.
But there's definitely a space that gets smaller and smaller with the blatant sort of pushing of religion into this genre of music.
For sure. And that happens. I mean, we see that happen with artists when they get clean, and we joke about like how their music's gonna be trash now because they like found themselves and stopped abusing drugs, like Kid Cudi. Like, you know what I'm saying? No, while we literally sit here and reflect on Mac Miller, niggas still make jokes about how, you know what I'm saying, Kid Cudi's music is trash because he got clean. So I mean, it's just kind of the same thing with religion, I feel like.
It's crazy though, right? Because like you have this sort of like weird connection of black people and religion, which is always like hyper exaggerated, hyper close,
Very performative.
That's the word I'm looking for. Very performative. It's very much steeped in sort of showing you.
Exactly. And showing everyone else, like proving your faith, not only to God, but to yourself and to your peers.
Yeah. And so along comes rap, which is an art form made by black people for black people that was thankfully kept by black people, at least at this point, knock on wood. And it allowed them the space to sort of explore this and sort of get between the crevices of it and figure out what they wanted from it and what they didn't want from it. And I think that's where hip hop is today. And I think it's very healthy. But at the same time, you have the same forces of, I guess, the bad side of the church, the bad side of the mosque, the bad side of the synagogue, whatever religion you ascribe to, just as prevalent there. And the balance, I don't know what that balance is, and I don't know how to find that balance per se. Especially when the artists that you loved, like the artists that you really looked up to, sort of swing all the way the other way.
Yeah.
It's the loss of something, right? For sure. But you can move on to another artist, I suppose, but it's definitely not the same.
For sure. And I mean, amongst just getting over the fact that like, oh, this music didn't like do what it did for, or what it used to do for me, I think it's also, for me, I think a lot of the reasons why people didn't connect with Chance is because they felt like he wasn't being genuine anymore. And I mean, really the whole reverse side of acid rappers is like, this nigga has never been so open, never been so vulnerable, and that's why people connected to it. And even Coloring Book, even if it wasn't like your shtick, it was like, yo, this nigga is genuinely happy.
At least he's being honest. He's being honest with himself. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have an issue, and I think this directly, heavily reflects the way people look at Christianity. I don't know, it didn't seem genuine for some reason, and maybe it was because it was like too positive, and niggas like were joking about the whole "I love my wife" thing, and like that shit is fucking hilarious.
That was literally a great impression.
Thank you. I literally sing it in my head sometimes, and I'm like lonely. It's really strange. But
for just taking wife applications, yeah.
No, I am not. But I don't know. I think it feels a little genuine because it's like not. A real person isn't 100% anything all the time. Like, you're not a real person if you don't doubt yourself. If you're not, I think some people that genuinely are spiritual or religious for themselves and not for like the performance aspect of it, will say like, you're not a religious person if you don't have like doubts, if you don't, you know what I'm saying?
100%.
And that's not just what I think it kind of seemed or felt like with Chance or whatever, like with his relationship with his wife and with his religion is just like, my nigga, we know you was just cheating or whatever. We know you were just on drugs. We know you were just doing all this shit. And now like, it's like, no, it's fine. Like, no, like I like God, please.
And I think what Kanye and Chance are missing in their sort of the deliverance of their ministry is that vulnerability that a lot of gospel artists always have.
Right.
Kirk Franklin, he writes shit about like, having problems with his face. Molly Music, same thing. A lot of the best artists like that are in that space show their chinks in their armor. And that's why people love them so much.
Yep.
Right. And I think what Kanye is attempting to do is like show that he's sort of invincible with God, right?
Yeah.
And like these, it's really weird. And I know I keep bringing the conversation back to Kanye, but one of the points I wanted to make is that I think a lot of rappers sort of try to show how invincible they are a lot of times, and it leads to like not great music.
Yeah.
I think the best music we get from rap is when rappers are vulnerable. Even with the album like Maxwell Creep's album, Freedom Banks, right?
Yep, thank you.
It's like he's showing us all the points in his life that he was vulnerable. He doesn't pretend to be invincible.
Right. And vulnerability doesn't have to be you like crying or telling all your secrets or stuff like that. And I think it's still kind of like looked at that way. Like vulnerability is literally being honest about your situation.
And that coupled with religion is very, very powerful, which is why I think I like Coloring Book so much, right? Is because he's being vulnerable while still being religious. And I'm like, oh wow, he's a real person, and this is exactly how I feel in my own religion. This is how I feel when I pray. This that is what I would hope that people would bring
right
when they rap about shit. But it's hard to say. I wanted to bring back to your point about the South, because that was a great ass point too, about how like the South has one or two flavors. Either like they understand religion and embrace it, but they understand they're breaking it, or they completely reject it. Right? They're either like, you know what, I know I'm a sinner, I know what I'm doing is wrong. Like J. Cole was Born Sinner is basically him being like, yeah, like I know I need to do better.
Right. And
it's not blatantly about Jesus, but it is definitely a reference to sort of religion.
Yeah, for sure. Because I was gonna say, even if these artists aren't specifically talking about God, they for damn sure are talking about their demons and their devils.
And they're talking about it in opposition to God.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
right. Like they are demons and devils. Yeah. Like
they, and all the Bible is pervasive throughout American culture, period. Like you cannot go growing up in America and not understand, like not have a cursory understanding of the Bible at the very least. And I say this again as a Muslim dude. So it's interesting how it's sort of like God will always weave its wave into different aspects of music that you didn't expect it to. I think even like 50 Cent, for example, when he was at his peak of his fame with Get Rich or Die Trying, I know a lot of people were actually, this is why I remember this. There was an argument when I used to be back on Facebook. This is back when Tyler was like, he was relatively new, but he had just come out with like the 666 stuff and all the other stuff, right? And people were rejecting a lot of, especially like one of my Kenyan friends was like, "No, this is blasphemous. I can't support this music." And I was making the point: how your favorite rapper 50 Cent? He's wearing a diamond-studded cross on an album about getting shot 9 times. How is this okay, but this isn't okay? Like what is okay to say and what is not okay to say has always been such a weird line for people. And I think it just depends. a lot less on faith and a lot more on culture, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue back to like kind of the South, because I think religion is such a culture. It's almost kind of not a religion anymore. Like, even if you don't necessarily practice whatever faith it is, it's like you still are going to go to church every Sunday just because, like, and that's like where you see half of your family.
It's a community center at that point, right? Like,
so again, to like, if people feel like it's being forced upon them, and not because it's something that like genuinely is beneficial to the Black community, which has been argued for a while now, that it was just something given to us by the white man to make us palatable and make us passive and make us subservient. So I understand in that aspect, or kind of respect, especially Southern artists' rejection of it. Like, one of my perfect examples, one of my favorite rappers is Baby Mother, and she calls herself the devil all the time.
Shout out to Baby Mother.
Shout out to Baby Mother. But yeah, she calls herself the devil all the time. And then when you read her background, she was like, yeah, like, I grew up in Southern ass Tennessee. She grew up in a super, super religious, non-secular household. Like, and still, like, going amongst her life, like, she ended up getting pregnant when she was like 14 or 15 by like a dude that she was like sleeping with that was a lot older than her, that she actually met, I want to say, within her church community.
It's wild.
Right. So you know what I'm saying? So her, initially, because one of my favorite songs from her is Heaven's Little Bastard. But the chorus is so blasphemous. It's actually on my playlist. Shout out to my playlist. I'll mention that later. And I remember actually telling Nia, shout out to Nia, one of our super religious friends, to listen to it because it was my favorite Baby Mother song. But I said, like, the chorus is super, super blasphemous. But like, it's a way of accepting herself, and almost, in my perception, like, defining her own culture by kind of being like, nah, I'm like, all y'all with this God shit, that's cool, but like, I'm the devil over here. Like, it's interesting.
And there's power in that,
right? Exactly. Because like, I was gonna say, like, the lyrics of the chorus are like, is there heaven for a bastard? I go to church, but only if I fuck the pastor. I eat the pussy in the motherfucking pew, give a fuck about what you do, fuck that book and fuck you. The only person that can judge me is God, bitch. Yeah. I think that is a perfect personification of how religion is looked at within the South, and like why people reject it. Like, this is being force fed down my throat, and honestly, the people that are forcing it don't even know why they're forcing it. They were literally just told by the Black person before them to force it. So fuck that. And as a spiritual religious person that I am, I can honestly respect that. There's
a saying, there's no compulsion in religion, right? Mm-hmm. If there's any compulsion, then it's not really religion,
right?
And that's a saying, that's a Muslim saying that a lot of like old imams will say, like, there's no compulsion in religion. You don't have to do this. This is up to you. Mm-hmm. And if you want to do it, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. And like, you know, every single line in that chorus just reminds me of a Tupac song. Like, only God can judge me. Mm-hmm. Is there heaven for a G? And again, we're not talking about religion through all of hip hop, because we would just miss so much shit. Like, maybe for another episode we'll do like history, but like it makes me think of like Nas's song "If Heaven Was a Mile Away."
Yep, I was just listening to that like 2 days ago, fam.
Yeah. And like it makes me think of like sort of like all the places where sort of our favorite artists and all our legends have sort of inserted religion in and then taken it out. Because Nas had his Muslim phase, he had his Christian phase, like he had a lot of like very different sort of like complicated relationships with religion throughout his career, and it affected his art in lots of different ways. And so it's interesting to see how today, especially what could be argued the most secular of times, right? Today is the most secular the America has ever been. It's never been more secular than this. How religion sort of grapples with the idea of hip hop and where that goes. And obviously, we're not discounting all of Christian rap, and we're not discounting all that stuff. We're just
not at all.
We're just not speaking on shit that we don't regularly listen to, because that would be blasphemous in itself. Where would you like to see, and to bring it back to Kanye before we go, what do you think Kanye would have to do to sort of get back in the good graces of like bridging religion and hip hop? Is it possible?
It's definitely possible, especially because of the religion that he is choosing to latch himself to. Not saying that it's ingenuine or disingenuine or anything, but I mean, the whole idea of like Christianity is like faith and forgiveness, and like trying to turn as many people over to God before he comes back as possible. You know what I'm saying? So this man can literally have a turn of heart tomorrow, but I think it just would have to be honest. I think what's so interesting about, and I mean, I wasn't raised within this, so this is just me, like kind of like you, like speaking on it from like an outside perception. But I've always felt like the Catholic religion to be so interesting because, you know, of all the rumors that they've had about like pedophilia and sexual assault and stuff like that. And I always kind of felt like it was so blatant because they, in their religion, they actually have something or a ritual that actually absolves them of their sins, like within that moment. You know what I mean? So they can literally go do some wild shit and talk to the men the next day and they'd be like, all right, cool. That's not how Christianity is. Like it's basically like all the decisions that you make, do what you want. But at the end of it all, you're going to have to like,
it's going to be weighed.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I definitely think people, if anything, especially religious people, are kind of expecting that turnover, which is another reason why I feel like Kanye is like attaching himself to this specific sect of blackness because
he's looking for forgiveness.
And we are the most forgiving, like we just are. So I expect this to eventually not work in the way that he doesn't want it to work. The merch doesn't sell. The Sunday services continue to get smaller or whatever. Because I think he's definitely building up to something. Them like homeless domes he was trying to do that they like tore down and right outside of Calabasas or whatever that he was trying to do for the homeless population and stuff like that. He tried to buy a church. And I swear to God, he only does these certain things still to this day because Jay-Z does it. Because Jay-Z and Beyonce actually bought a church in New Orleans and are redoing something to it. We don't know what, but that was announced like a year or two ago, and now Kanye's doing all this Jesus stuff. I think it's really, really interesting. He's actually trying to buy a church in Calabasas, but
it's pretty funny.
It's pretty fucking funny. But so I see if this not working, or once it starts to like go down, you know, people start to care less. He's probably gonna do the passive God thing and like apologize and be like, God has helped healed me and I see differently now. Like, allow me to continue to grow. And then he's just going to go do something else.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think religion in general will find a lot more ways into hip hop. I think as we go forward and as this country becomes more secular in nature, hip hop and religion will find a common home because they will be both places that are of rebellion. And I also think that faith is integral to the artist, right? I think faith and art are always going to be intertwined, and those who have faith will always make art, and those who make art will always have faith, whether like it is with a single God or not. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I'm going to do a disclaimer, and this disclaimer is probably going to go in the front of the episode. So Bria and I are speaking for ourselves. We don't speak for anyone else when it comes to this religion stuff. We also do not judge how anyone does their own ministry. So if this is Kanye's way of worship, more power to him. God will be the judge of that, and God can be the only judge of that.
Okay.
We are simply offering our own opinions, and we're just observing what we see and talking about it. With that said, like if you feel like, hey man, why the fuck did you talk about God this way, or why did you talk about religion this way? Understand that like we are not doing it to be like judgmental in nature, and we're not doing it to attack any particular religion or speak on some shit that we don't know about. So feel free to tell us if you need to tell us, because obviously we're not immune to misspeaking. But at the same time, understand we come from a place where of deep respect for people who are religious and who have that faith. And we understand that it is necessarily a sensitive place.
Facts.
But yeah, thanks for listening today, guys. And feel free to leave your own comments. We're going to do probably like an episode where we cover religion more holistically within hip hop. I especially want to talk about like Islam and hip hop because there's a huge like thing there that not, and I obviously have a lot of knowledge about it because like, well, what else would I have knowledge about? But yeah, so we're gonna go further in this for sure. But this is sort of like just our thoughts today. So thanks again for listening. This is actually gonna be released after our Lauryn Hill episode, so we'll definitely go back and talk about To Zion, sort of her spiritual connection
for
as
sure.
well.
Yeah.
But again, we'll talk about all the past shit coming up soon. Thanks for listening. Bria, you want to plug a bunch of shit, right? We got a bunch of shit to plug because playlist, Twitter, Instagram.
Follow our Instagram, A Hip Hop Podcast, you know, doing the things.
She's going to be posting this week, I think.
I am. I'm going to be posting this week. And I also released my first playlist.
Send me that link so I can tweet it out.
I got you. Yeah, I don't know. I decided to do a playlist series for no other reason than...
She wants to.
Yeah, and a lot of people have asked me to. So here you go. The first one's called Good Taste Volume 1. A lot of baby mother on there. Check it out.
I'll definitely be tweeting it out from our account.
Cool.
And she'll probably put it on the story this week.
I will. And follow us on Twitter. Join the discussions. All that will be back and popping. But yeah, follow us on Instagram. Yeah. Please.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. Peace and love.